Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly, and to Tacitus's Germania. I am Pemberton. This is part 2, and the close of the book. Having described what the Germans are like in general, Tacitus now does what every ancient geographer loved to do. He names the tribes, one after another, and tells us what is peculiar to each. We start among the peoples along the Rhine. The frontier Rome knew best: the Batavians, the Chatti, the warlike nations the legions had bled against, and we travel outward, to the coast of the North Sea, to the mighty confederation of the Suevians and their dark forest rites of the goddess they call Mother Earth, and at last to the farthest peoples of all, the ship-borne Suiones on their northern sea, the amber-gathering Aestii, and the wretched, wild Fenni at the world's frozen rim. Let us finish the book.
The deified Julius, foremost among writers, tells us that the Gauls were once more powerful and more feared than they are now. From this it is likely that they too crossed into Germany. After all, how slight a barrier a river must have been against any nation that had grown strong enough to seize new homes or exchange old ones, especially at a time when all lands were still open to all, and had not yet been divided, claimed, and guarded by the founding and power of monarchies. The country between the Hercynian forest and the rivers Semnones and Rhine was therefore held by the Helvetians, while the land beyond it was held by the Boians, both of them nations of Gaul. A place called Boemum still remains, preserving the ancient name of the country and showing its age, though its inhabitants have changed. But whether the Araviscans came from the Oesians, a German nation that moved into Pannonia, or whether the Oesians came from the Araviscans, after moving from there into Germany, remains uncertain. Both peoples still use the same language, customs, and laws. Since in ancient times they lived with the same poverty and the same freedom, the hardships and advantages on either side of the river were equal and shared by both peoples. The Treverians and Nervians eagerly claimed the honor of German descent, because the glory of such an origin would free them from any suspicion of resembling the Gauls in body or in softness. Those who live on the bank of the Rhine, the Vangaianes, the Tribotians, and the Nemites, are certainly all Germans. The Euboeans are ashamed of their origin, though they have a special honor to boast of. They earned settlement as a Roman colony, and still like to be called Agrippinensians after the name of their founder. They formerly came from beyond the Rhine, and because they had often proved their loyalty, they were settled on the very bank of the river, not so they themselves might be confined or guarded there, but so they might guard and defend that frontier against the rest of the Germans. Of all these nations, the Batavians are the most remarkable for bravery. They hold only a small stretch of territory on the Rhine, but they possess an island in the river. They were once part of the Cattons, and because of internal conflicts they moved to these homes, from which they might become part of the Roman Empire. They still retain this honor, along with the memory of their old alliance with us. They are not insulted by having to pay tribute, nor are they subject to being drained by tax farmers. Free from every levy and payment, and set apart only for fighting, they are reserved entirely for war, like a storehouse of weapons and armor. The nation of the Matiatians stands under the same kind of obligation. Such is the power and greatness of the Roman people, that the awe and respect of their empire have been carried beyond the Rhine and the old boundaries. The Matiatians live on the opposite banks and enjoy a settlement and limits of their own, yet in spirit and inclination they are attached to us. In other respects they resemble the Batavians, except that, because they still breathe their native air and possess their original soil, they gain from this a greater vigor and sharpness. Among the peoples of Germany, I would not count those who occupy the lands subject to decimation, even though they live beyond the Rhine and the Danube. That region, having no fixed owner, was seized by various worthless and wandering Gauls, men made bold by poverty. Later, when our borders were enlarged and our garrisons and frontier extended, it became an outlying part of the empire and part of a province. Beyond these live the Cattons, whose territories begin at the Hercynian forest. Their lands do not consist of the broad, marshy plains found among the other communities spread across the vast extent of Germany. Instead, they have ranges of hills, which run high and unbroken for a long distance, then gradually sink and fade away. The Hercynian forest stays for a time with its native Cattons, then suddenly leaves them. This people are marked by harder and stronger bodies, close-knit limbs, stern faces, and greater force of spirit. For Germans, they are men of considerable sense and skill. They honor chosen men, listen to those appointed over them, know how to keep their position, recognize opportunities, restrain their own heat and impatience, make use of the day, and entrench themselves at night. They count fortune among things slippery and uncertain, but bravery among things secure and unfailing. At what is extremely rare and can be learned only through sound discipline, they place more confidence in the commander's conduct than in the army's strength. Their whole force consists of infantry, who carry not only their weapons but also iron tools and provisions. You may see other Germans equipped for battle, but the Cattons equipped for war. They rarely risk sudden raids or chance encounters. It is truly characteristic of cavalry to conquer suddenly or flee suddenly. Such speed and haste look more like fear. Patience and deliberation are more closely related to courage. There is also a custom practiced among other nations of Germany, though very rarely and only by individuals more daring than the rest, but among the Cattons it is followed by general consent. As soon as they reach manhood, they let their hair and beards grow, and they do not lay aside this appearance, vowed to courage, until they have killed an enemy. Over the blood and spoils of a foe they uncover their faces. They say that only then have they paid the debt and duty contracted by their birth, and made themselves worthy of their country and worthy of their parents. On the spiritless, cowardly, and unwarlike, this disfiguring look remains. All the bravest also wear an iron ring, a mark of great dishonor among that nation, and keep it like a chain until they are released by killing an enemy. Many of the Cattans delight in always carrying this terrible appearance, and when they have grown white with age, they become striking and fearsome by these marks, both to the enemy and to their own countrymen. They always make the first assault in every engagement. They always form the front of the battle, as men singular and dreadful in appearance. Even in peace they soften nothing of the grimness and horror of their faces. They have no house to live in, no land to cultivate, and no household charge or care. Whoever they come to stay with maintains them. They are always lavish with the substance of others, always contemptuous of their own, until the weakness of old age overtakes them and makes them unequal to the demands of such harsh bravery. Next to the Cattans live the Suevians and Tencterians, beside the Rhine, which there runs in a steady and settled channel, enough to serve as a boundary. The Tencterians, besides their usual glory in war, surpass others in the service and discipline of cavalry. Cattans gain no higher praise from their infantry than the Tencterians gain from their horsemen. This was the order established by their forefathers, and their descendants still follow it. Riding and training horses are the games of their children. In this exercise the young men find a field for rivalry, and in it the old men take pleasure in continuing. Horses are passed down by the father as part of his household and family. Horses are transferred among the rights of inheritance, and as such the son receives them. But unlike other property, they do not go to the eldest son simply by priority of birth. They go to the one who proves outstanding in boldness and superior in war. Next to the Tencterians once lived the Bructerians. It is said that the Chamavians and Angravarians now occupy their place, after driving out and almost destroying the Bructerians with the help of neighboring nations. This may have happened because those nations hated the Bructerians' arrogance, or because they were tempted by plunder, or through the special favor of the gods toward us Romans. The gods even allowed us to enjoy the sight of the battle. More than 60,000 people fell in it, without a single Roman blow being struck, and even more glorious for us, they fell in order to give us a spectacle of pleasure and recreation. May the gods keep alive and make lasting among these nations, if not any love for us, then certainly this hostility and hatred toward one another. Since the fate of the empire now presses forward in this way, fortune can do us no greater favor than by spreading discord among our enemies. Behind the Angravarians and Chamavians are the Dulgibinians and Chassuarians, along with other nations of less note. In front of them are the Frisians. The country of Frisia is divided into two parts, called the Greater and the Lesser according to the measure of their strength. Both nations stretch along the Rhine all the way to the ocean, and they surround vast lakes that once carried Roman fleets. From there we have even ventured out into the ocean itself. On its coasts common report says that the Pillars of Hercules still stand, either because Hercules really visited those regions, or because we are accustomed to attach his famous name to everything grand and glorious wherever it is found. Drusus, when he made the attempt, did not lack courage to pursue it, but the rough ocean opposed him and would not allow discoveries to be made about itself any more than about Hercules. After that the undertaking was abandoned. Indeed, it seemed more pious and reverent to believe the marvelous deeds of the gods than to know and prove them. So far I have been describing Germany toward the west. Toward the north it curves away in an immense sweep. First comes the nation of the Chaucians. They begin immediately on the borders of the Frisians and occupy part of the shore, but they extend so far that they border on all the peoples I have already named, until at last, by a long circuit, they reach the boundaries of the Cattans. The Chaucians not only possess so vast a region, but fill it. Among all the Germans they are the noblest, a people who prefer to maintain their greatness by justice rather than by violence. They live in peace, withdrawn from foreign quarrels, free from greed for more possessions, and free from any desire to rule over others. They provoke no wars, ravage no countries, and seek no plunder. The strongest proof of their courage and power is that, without wronging or oppressing others, they have come to stand above them all. Yet they are always ready to take up arms, and if necessity demands it, armies are quickly raised, for they are strong and rich in both men and horses. Even when they are quiet and their weapons are laid aside, their reputation and name remain just as great. Alongside the Chaucians and Cattans lived the Cheruscans. Because they had no enemy to stir them, they were weakened by a long and unbroken peace, and they willingly fostered that condition. This way of life was more pleasant than secure, since the peace a weaker people enjoys among neighbors who are very powerful and eager to rule is always treacherous. Once the sword is drawn, modesty and fair dealing are useless pleas for the weaker side. These are names the stronger always claims for itself. Thus the Cheruscans, who were once known as good and upright, are now called cowards and fools, and the fortune of the Cattans, who subdued them, was immediately praised as wisdom. In the downfall of the Cheruscans, the Phocians, who were also their neighbors, were drawn in as well. They shared equally in the disaster, though in prosperity they had been weaker and less regarded. In the same winding tract of Germany, close to the ocean, lived the Cimbrians, a community now very small but great in fame. Many wide traces and monuments of their ancient renown still remain, especially their entrenchments on both shores. Their extent is so great that from them one may still measure the greatness and numbers of that people and accept the account of so mighty an army. The first mention of the arms of the Cimbrians was made in the 640th year of Rome, during the consulship of Caecilius Metellus and Papirius Carbo. If we count from that time to the second consulship of the Emperor Trajan, the interval is almost 210 years. For so long we have been conquering Germany. Across so vast a span of time between those 2 points, many blows and disasters have been suffered on both sides. In truth, neither from the Samnites, nor from the Carthaginians, nor from both Spains, nor from all the nations of Gaul, have we received more frequent checks and alarms, nor even from the Parthians. The liberty of the Germans is stronger and harder to overcome than the monarchy of the Arsacides. Indeed, what can the power of the East bring up to our dishonor except the fall of Crassus, when that same power was later overthrown and humbled by Ventidius, and the great King Pacorus lost his life? That the Germans deprived the Roman people of 5 armies, all commanded by consuls. By the Germans, the commanders of those armies, Carbo Cassius, Scaurus Aurelius, Servilius Scipio, and Marcus Manlius, were all routed or captured. By the Germans, even the Emperor Augustus was deprived of Varus and 3 legions. Nor were they defeated without difficulty and loss of men by Caius Marius in Italy, by the deified Julius in Gaul, or by Drusus, Tiberius, and Germanicus in their own territories. Soon afterward, the great threats Caligula made against them ended in mockery and ridicule. After that they remained quiet until, taking advantage of our internal division and civil wars, they stormed and seized the winter entrenchments of the legions and aimed at ruling Gaul. From there they were again driven out, and in the times just before the present, we gained over them a triumph rather than a true victory. I must now speak of the Suevians. They are not, like the Catans and Tencterians, contained in a single people, but are divided into several nations, each with its own name, though in general they are called Suevians and occupy the larger part of Germany. This people are marked by a special custom. They twist their hair and bind it up in a knot. In this way the Suevians are distinguished from the other Germans, and the free Suevians from their slaves. Among other nations this practice is also found, whether because of kinship with the Suevians or, as often happens, through imitation, but there it is rare and never lasts beyond youth. The Suevians, even when age has turned their hair white, continue to draw it backward in a stern, bristling fashion, and often tie it only on the top of the head. The hair of their princes is arranged with more care, and to that extent they study to appear handsome and well-ordered, but there is nothing blameworthy in their purpose. They do not do it to attract love or inspire it. They dress their hair this way when going to war, adorning their heads, so that they seem taller and more terrifying in the eyes of the enemy. Among all the Suevians, the Semnones claim to be the oldest and noblest. Their claim to ancient origin is supported by their religious rites. At a fixed time each year, all the peoples who come from the same stock send representatives to gather in a forest. This forest is sacred because of the idolatrous practices of their ancestors and because of the superstitious awe attached to it from very ancient times. There, by publicly sacrificing a human being, they begin the dreadful ceremony of their barbarous worship. They also show another kind of reverence to this grove. No one enters it unless he is bound with cords, by which he acknowledges his own lowly condition, his submission, and the power of the deity who is present there. If he falls, he is not allowed to get up or be lifted up, but must crawl along the ground. The purpose and meaning of all this superstition is that this is the place from which their nation first began, that here lives God, the supreme ruler of the world, and that everything else is subject to him and bound to obey him. The strength of the Semnones has enlarged their influence and authority, for they occupy 100 towns. Because their community is so large, they consider themselves the head of the Suevians. What gives the Langobards their distinction, by contrast, is the smallness of their number. Though they are surrounded by many very powerful nations, they do not seek safety through submissiveness or flattery, but through battle and bold deeds. Next in order come the Reudignians and Avians and Angles and Verinians and Eudoses and Suardones and Neuithones, all protected by rivers or forests. Nothing especially remarkable is found among any one of these nations, except that they all unite in the worship of Herthum, that is, Mother Earth. They believe that she takes part in human affairs and visits countries. On an island in the ocean stands the wood castum. And it is a chariot dedicated to the goddess, covered with a curtain, and no one is allowed to touch it except the priest. Whenever the goddess enters this sacred vehicle of hers, he recognizes her presence, and with deep reverence he accompanies the movement of the chariot, which is always drawn by yoked cows. Then days of rejoicing always follow, and in every place that she chooses to honor with her visit and her company, feasts and recreation abound. They do not go to war, they do not touch weapons, every hostile weapon is locked away. Peace and rest are then known, and then loved, until the same priest brings the goddess back to her temple, when she has had enough of the company of mortal beings. Afterward the chariot is washed and purified in a hidden lake, and so are the curtains. Indeed, the deity herself is washed too, if you choose to believe it. Slaves perform this service, and immediately afterward they are doomed to be swallowed up in the same lake. For this reason all people are filled with mysterious terror, and also with a sacred ignorance about what that thing must be which no one sees except those who are about to die. This part of the Suevians stretches into the middle of Germany. The next neighboring community is that of the Germanians, for I now follow the course of the Danube, as shortly before I followed that of the Rhine. This people is faithful to the Romans. For this reason, among all the Germans, they alone are allowed to trade with us, not merely on the bank of the Rhine, but more widely, even in that splendid colony in the province of Rhoetia. They travel everywhere as they choose and without a guard. To other nations we show only our weapons and camps. To this people we open our houses and homes, as to men who have no desire to seize them. In the lands of the Germanians rises the Elbe, a very famous river and one formerly well known to us. At present we only hear its name. Close beside the Germanians live the Nariscans, and next to them the Marcomannians and Quadians. Among these the Marcomannians are most notable for strength and reputation. Indeed, they won their very homeland by courage, after formerly driving out the Boians from it. Nor have the Nariscans or Quadians declined in spirit. This is, as it were, the frontier of Germany, as far as Germany is washed by the Danube. Down to times within our own memory, the Marcomannians and Quadians were ruled by kings native to their own people, descended from the noble line of Marabadus and Tudrus. At present they are even subject to foreigners. But the whole power and authority of their kings comes from the authority of the Romans. They rarely receive help from our arms, but very often from our money. No less powerful are the several peoples beyond them, the Marsignians, the Gathinians, the Oesians, and the Barians, who together enclose the Marcomannians and Quadians from behind. Of these, the Marsignians and the Barians resemble the Suevians in speech and dress. From the Gallic language spoken by the Gathinians, and from the Pannonian language spoken by the Oesians, it is clear that neither people is German. This is also clear from their willingness to pay tribute. Tribute is imposed on them as foreigners, partly by the Sarmatians and partly by the Quadians. To increase their disgrace, the Gathinians are forced to labor in iron mines. All these nations possess only a little level country. They are settled among forests, and on the ridges and slopes of mountains. Suevia is divided by a continuous ridge of mountains. Beyond it live many distinct nations. Of these the Lygians are the most numerous and widespread, and are divided into several communities. It will be enough to name the most powerful: the Arians, Helvicones, Monimians, Elysians, and Naharvalians. Among the Naharvalians is shown a grove sacred to an extremely ancient devotion. A priest presides over it dressed like a woman. According to the Roman explanation, it is Castor and Pollux who are worshipped there. This divinity is named Alcis. There are no images there, and no signs of any foreign superstition, yet their worship is directed to young men and to brothers. Now the Arians, besides the military strength in which they surpass the other nations just listed, are stern and fierce in their appearance. They deliberately heighten and improve their natural grimness and ferocity by art and by choosing the right time. They carry black shields, paint their bodies black, and choose dark nights for battle. By the very terror and ghostly color of their army, they strike fear into the enemy, since no one can endure their astonishing and almost infernal appearance. For in every battle, the eyes are conquered first. Beyond the Lygians live the Gautons. They are ruled by a king, and are therefore held under a somewhat stricter form of subjection than the other German nations, though not so strict that all their liberty is destroyed. Close beside them on the coast of the ocean are the Rugians and Lemuvians. These several nations are marked by the same traits: a round shield, a short sword, and government by kings. Next come the communities of the Suevians, who are placed in the ocean itself. Besides their strength in men and arms, they are very powerful at sea. Their ships differ from ours in this respect. They have a prow at each end, so that they are always ready to row toward shore without having to turn around. They are not driven by sails, and they do not have fixed rows of oar benches along the sides. Instead, the rowers work here and there throughout the vessel, as is done on some rivers, and they shift their oars from one place to another as the course changes one way or the other. Among them, wealth is also held in great honor. For that reason a single ruler governs them, with no limit on his power, and demands obedience without limit. Nor, as among the other nations of Germany, are arms there used freely by everyone. They are shut away and guarded under the care of a particular keeper, who is in fact always a slave. The ocean protects them from sudden invasions and attacks by enemies. Besides, armed bands, when they have no work to do, easily become corrupt and disorderly. The truth is that it does not suit the interest of an arbitrary prince to entrust the care and power of arms either to a nobleman, or to a freeman, or indeed to any man above the condition of a slave. Beyond the Suevians lies another sea, very heavy and almost without motion. It is believed that this sea bounds and surrounds the whole globe, because after the sun has set, the reflection of his light continues until he rises again, so bright that it dims the stars. Popular belief has added more, that the sound of his rising out of the sea can be heard, that divine forms are then seen, and also the rays around his head. Only this far, if what report says is true, do the limits of nature extend. On the right side of the Suevian Sea live the Aestian nations. They use the same customs and clothing as the Suevians, but their language more closely resembles that of Britain. They worship the mother of the gods. As the special mark of their national superstition, they wear images of wild boars. This alone serves them in place of arms. This is the safeguard of all, and by this every worshipper of the goddess is protected even among his enemies. The use of iron weapons is rare among them, but clubs are common. In producing grain and the other fruits of the earth, they work with more diligence and patience than is usual for the laziness of Germans. They even search the sea, and of all these peoples they are the only ones who gather amber. They call it glazing, and find it among the shallows and on the very shore. But with the usual lack of curiosity and knowledge found among barbarians, they have neither learned nor do they inquire what its nature is, or from what cause it is produced. In truth, it long lay neglected among the other coarse cast-offs of the sea, until our luxury gave it a name and a value. To them it has no use. They gather it rough, offer it in coarse and unpolished pieces, and receive payment for it with amazement. Yet you would suppose amber to be a liquid that comes from trees, because in its transparent substance birds and other animals are often seen. These, it seems, first stuck in the soft gum and as it hardened, became completely enclosed. I am inclined to believe that, just as woods and groves dripping frankincense and balms are found in the hidden parts of the east, so in the islands and mainland of the west such gums are drawn out by the force and nearness of the sun. At first they are liquid and flow into the neighboring sea, then winds and waves throw them on to the opposite shore. If you test the nature of amber by applying fire to it, it catches like a torch and feeds a thick, oily flame with a very strong scent. Soon afterward it becomes sticky like pitch or rosin. Bordering the Suevians are the people Citones. They agree with them in all other things, but differ in one point. Here the sovereignty is exercised by a woman. In this they fall so notoriously away not only from a state of liberty, but even below a state of bondage. Here the territories of the Suevians end. Whether I should count the Pucinians, the Venetians, and the Fennians among the Sarmatians or among the Germans is something I cannot determine. The Pucinians, whom some call Bastarnians, speak the same language as the Germans, wear the same kind of clothing, build in the same manner, and live in the same manner, in that dirtiness and sloth common to all. They have been somewhat corrupted into the fashion of the Sarmatians through marriages between their leading families and that nation. From this the Venetians have taken very many of their customs, and a strong resemblance. For they are constantly ranging through and troubling with robberies all the forests and mountains lying between the Pucinians and Fennians. Yet they are more rightly reckoned among the Germans, because they have fixed houses, carry shields, prefer to travel on foot, and are outstanding in speed. All these usages are very different from those of the Sarmatians, who live on horseback and dwell in wagons. The nation of the Fennians lives in astonishing savagery and in foul poverty. They have no arms, no horses, and no homes. Their food is the common herbs, their clothing is skins, their bed is the earth. Their only hope is in their arrows, which, for lack of iron, they tip with bones. They all support themselves by hunting, women as well as men, for the women wander about with the men and ask for a share of the prey. Even for their infants, they have no other shelter against the violence of storms and ravening beasts than to cover them with branches of trees twisted together. This is the lodging of the old men, and to this the young also resort. They judge such a condition happier than the painful work of cultivating the ground, than the labor of building houses, and than the anxieties of hope and fear that attend either defending their own property or seizing that of others. Safe from the designs of men, safe from the hostility of the gods, they have achieved a thing of infinite difficulty. Nothing remains for them even to wish for. The accounts that go farther are fabulous. For example, that the Helusians and Auctions have the faces and appearance of men, but the bodies and limbs of savage beasts. Since this is something about which I have no certain information, I shall leave it untouched.
And there Tacitus's Germania ends, at the misty edge of the world, with a frank admission that beyond it everything is rumour. It is a small book that cast a very long shadow read for centuries as the founding portrait of the peoples of the North and, in darker hands, badly misused. But set the later abuses aside and listen to what Tacitus actually wrote, a clear-eyed, admiring, and faintly worried Roman looking across the river at a hardy free people and wondering, between the lines, how long his own soft empire could hold them back. Thank you for sitting with the whole of the Germania. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.